All right, welcome everybody to another edition of the Dad at Arms channel. I'm your host, Colt, the Dad at Arms, and joining me today we have Tim Seeley and Freddie Williams II,
I'm
who
Freddie.
are the creative team on Turtles of Grayskull. So, welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us on, man.
Yeah.
Sorry for the technical troubles. And when Freddie is like looks up, so Freddie always looks like he's looking up at me, and I'm taller than him. It's very confusing.
Everyone looks up to you, Tim. You
Yeah,
gotta get used to that, man.
That's right. You're a role model.
View of anyone except like my daughter.
Gee willikers, you're like 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
So we're here today. We're going to talk more about Turtles of Grayskull. Now this is a follow-up chat that we're going to be having because we already talked previously a few months back, right as this series was getting started, and so now that I believe it drops on the 23rd, the final issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's jump into it.
Yeah, that's this week. Okay.
Yeah, this week. So
yeah, it's generous. It's generous of you to say a couple months ago because we've had several delays and some other stuff that's made it a lot longer than that. It's more than a few. It's been several months, but either way, I'm happy that it's finally coming out and glad to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm a huge fan of both of these brands. Masters of the Universe and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are my two absolute favorite things in the world. I was so excited for this project back during the first attempt, and then it got canceled, and I was really bummed. So it was like a dream come true when it was re-announced, and now we actually have it here. So on that note, with brands as big as Masters of the Universe and the Ninja Turtles, these things just have so much nostalgia and love baked into them. For creative purposes, where do you guys what's the starting point to even begin bringing these two worlds together?
Well, we had toys that helped, right? We had the designs that they did, so that really helped. I think it didn't mean that we had to use that story. And I remember Freddie and I was talking about this early, which was, well, maybe we shouldn't do the exact story that's in the mini comics. So that was kind of our beginning.
Awesome.
Yeah, we had a phone call. Basically, Tim and I scheduled a phone call to just chat about possibilities. But Tim basically had his first idea, his first impulse was the right way to go. So it was just like, from my perspective, I was just like, that sounds awesome, and maybe this and maybe this, and then Tim took some of those things and other things we didn't have really the space for, because I wish we had like a 12-issue miniseries or something like that, really, but or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Just 4 issues, it's kind of hard to get every little joke or big cliffhanger or whatever into. We would have liked to have done some more twists and turns back on itself and stuff like that. So, but from my perspective, the origin point or where we started was Tim's direction. He had a great direction already, and then after that, visually for me, it was I drew the mini comics for the Turtles of Grayskull toy line, and it was trying to create a visual distinction that the characters still look like the same designs, but they weren't like the same head shapes. And hopefully, so just for clarity, the mini comics ones look a little bit more playmates, like the heads of the turtles, and the Masters of the Universe look a little more friendly and that sort of thing in the mini comics. And then visually, I wanted them to look a little more powerful, or in quotes adult or mature or whatever, for the Dark Horse miniseries, where they're a lot more textured, and it's that kind of stuff. Making the turtles not identically high, tall and all that stuff, figuring that stuff out. But yeah, I think that the toys, if you ever had a Masters of the Universe toy and a Turtles toy next to each other, they look like they fit together anyway. It's like their stance and the sort of bulk and the pose that they were in and stuff. So, and with Masters, you can have any type of character in there, and it seems to work really.
Yeah, they're very chunky and they're just chunky toys. They feel good in your hands. They're fun to smash together and play with. And
it like this, very perfectly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I know exactly what you mean. That hand pose is specific to those. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
Mattel, we started this. Mattel had told us that there was a toy line coming, so this is before it was even announced. And we had seen those figures, sort of production shots and stuff, but it wasn't, there was a lot of room in there for us to interpret how that would work, and there was characters that weren't touched. And so one of the very early things Freddie and I talked about was, well, can we do characters? We know these are the ones coming for the toys, and then part of our idea was, is there characters we can do that maybe that'll lead to toys later? So that's why we were like, we threw around the idea of Rennet and then Ninjor, because they weren't in the initial selection, and it kind of seemed like, well, those are two characters. Rennet is a Ninja Turtles character who looks like a He-Man figure.
Yes.
Ninjor is a He-Man figure who looks like a Ninja Turtles figure.
Yeah.
It totally made sense that if we could figure out a way to have those two be the sort of guiding protagonist and antagonist, that we would get something that wasn't immediately covered, because I think Freddie and I both felt like, well, it should be surprising.
Mm-hmm.
If you pick this up and you already have all the toys, yes, you want to see all the toys do stuff, but like, you already know the story in this scenario. You already know that, like, I can't surprise you that Mousetrap Jaw,
right?
It doesn't work for you as a surprise. But if you get to issue 3 and you turn the last page and it's Ninja, you could be like, oh, I didn't know that was.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Actually, I've never heard you succinctly put it like that before. That Renette looks like a Masters of the Universe and Ninjor looks like a Ninja Turtle character. That's perfectly stated. I think that's great. And Ninjor, I think, unless I'm mistaken, I think your take on Ninjor did lead to a toy. Am I correct?
I mean, I can't say for sure if that's why we got him, but we did get him, and we were able to use the story.
Yeah.
He had said, which to coincide perfectly with the toy.
Yeah, maybe they already had it in mind. I don't know. But from my perspective, it was like Tim came up with the cool idea, and then now Ninjor is a toy. So to me, it just seemed like something that they were like, oh, Tim had a good idea. Let's do that.
That's awesome. On my shelf, I have all of the toys from this line, except I think Ninjor and Clamp Champ are the only two, and they're in the mail. So I'm waiting for them to show up. But...
I'm waiting for my Ninjor as well. That was like my big, if I can get something that was made into a toy in any way, so like I have the He Skeletor figure prominently displayed on my wall over there.
Exactly.
So do both of you guys have the Mecha Neck from like waves 6 and 7, I think it is, something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's one that I designed.
Did you?
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there was a time where basically Mattel just said, can you give us kind of almost like a shotgun effect of like very rough designs. They had like 3 characters in mind, and I did like 3 or 4, or maybe it was 5 characters, and I did 3 each, or 3 that I did 5 of it, whatever it was, like really fast, brief sort of like concept sketches that were not full turnarounds or anything. And the Mecha Neck, one of the Mecha Neck ones I did worked out for them. So
that's cool.
That made me feel very happy, because I like designing toys or statues or something is still something that's very, very brand new to me. So I've done like a Batman statue, and there's a Bebop and Rocksteady thing I did for NECA, and some other things like that. But it's just in other words, I'm not used to seeing my stuff in a 3D form, so it's interesting to see that.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's very cool.
Now I've got to get. I didn't get that line yet because I ordered them, but now I'm
excited. They're the most recent ones.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
All right, so I want to say something before I forget. Like, there's been 3 times where I almost jumped in with it, but just last week, our editor Brett said it's okay to talk about this. That I had emailed to find out if the trade paperback for Turtles of Grayskull would have only the Dark Horse crossover, or if there was any way to have the mini comics printed in there, reprinted big in the trade. And at first he said there was no plans to do the mini comics, but last week he got back to me and he said, all right, now the mini comics will be in the trade. That's not because I said so.
That's awesome.
They just discussed it. So, and I said, is it okay if I talk about it? And he said, yeah, feel free. So because the trade was announced on places you could pre-order it, and it might not mention yet, because they might not have been updated, that there's mini comics included. But that's what Brett told us. So I'm very happy. I can't wait to see that. That to me is perfect, because you can read both stories sequentially, or if you want to, you can read the mini comics first, then read ours or whatever. In other words, you get the full story and you get overlapping stories, but they're unique stories as well. So I think that's great.
That's great.
Because they were meant to tie together, kind of, because the universe that they kind of have to reboot is the mini comics version.
Yeah,
yeah. That plays, because that was one thing that, like, some people's reaction to the first issue was like, "Oh, this just starts like you have to know something." I was like, "No, you don't." What?
It dropped it.
No, yeah, exactly.
It drops you into a later part of the story to hook you. And then you go, oh, everything's going to work out great. And then a terrible thing happens. And you're like, what the hell is happening in the first issue? And then you get to see it start looping around and stuff. So, no, I think, Tim, I mean, I've said it many times, privately and stuff, but I just think you did an excellent job of taking elements of the mini comic. Because I was nervous about that. Tim was like, it's no big deal, because he just had a really creative, cool solution to it. But I was nervous that how do you break away from the mini comics for it to still make sense with the mini comics without just retelling the exact same story. And there were people at conventions who came up to me and said that they hadn't yet picked up our Dark Horse crossover because they thought, since they already had the mini comics, it was just going to be like a retelling of the exact same story. And What'd you say?
That's what I was worried about. What you just,
yes.
I was worried about that.
Yeah. And, of course I, explained it fully to them, but there probably are still people out there who are thinking that, but if they get the trade, they'll get to see that it goes all over the place. So,
you get to see the grand
I hope they give it a shot.
All of it.
Yeah.
No, that's really great news. I like that. I hadn't heard that yet. That's cool. Yeah. So speaking of the toys, what I like about this is that, and it goes back to my favorite Ninja Turtles character, who is Michelangelo. And I love that now 2 times in kind of these crossover series that you've drawn Freddie, we get to see Michelangelo pretending to be the hero that he's crossing over with. So the first time we saw it was in the Batman one where we got the toy of him in the Batman costume, where he's trying it on it and it doesn't fit his head.
Yeah.
Now, now we've got he's doing his best He-Man impersonation with the wig and everything, and it just makes me smile so much because Michelangelo is such a fun character, and that's one of the in character for him. That's
one of the delights of playing with him is that he fits serious stuff, and just read Last Ronin if you're curious about how well he fits. And then he also fits all the way to the really the sort of goofy stuff, and it's within his character to do it very quickly, to go really serious to really happy and that sort of thing, so you can really play with them and add exclamation points to different parts of the story and stuff.
I love it. I'm so glad.
And in the fourth issue, it's like I almost spoiled something at the start of the sentence, but the 4th issue hasn't come out for you guys. We've been done with it for a couple of months, so
right.
But the 4th issue has a nice Mikey moment in it as well. So I don't really have a good button for that story because I can't tell the story. So pick it up and check it out. Tim did a great job writing it.
Awesome. And again, that's April 23rd that that everybody can pick that issue up. So yeah, just kind of living in both of these worlds. Both of these are kind of born out of, obviously they have the early mini comics for He-Man and the toys and stuff. And then the Turtles have their early days with the Mirage comics. Mm-hmm. But I think most people are coming at both of these from their existence as Saturday morning cartoons. And so when you have kind of that style, that energy of these 2 big franchises, and you get to play with those and you get to build stories out of those, what's kind of for you guys, what's the most fun aspect of doing that, of bringing this Saturday morning energy to these pages?
I think it's like that's the thing Freddie and I talked about, because there was no clear answer on, well, what continuity is this?
Mm-hmm.
And so we, I think we made the call that it's the crossover continuity. So this is the same He-Man from the Injustice crossover. Okay.
And from the Thundercats crossover.
Thundercats,
right.
Yeah.
So he's the distilled Master of the Universe world. He's like, all the things exist, even if they seem contradictory, we can slide that stuff in. So I think the overall rules are there, but we can. One of the things we kind of added in, he's got sort of the mini comics, sort of some of the vibe, the more serious barbarian stuff. Some of that is there, but also he's got Orko and he's got so all of it is that distilled version, and that's kind of how I played Turtles because it seemed to be the one that was the Turtles that you did like in the same Turtles that appeared in the Batman one, the same Turtles that appeared in the Power Rangers crossover. Mm-hmm. That also seemed to be a sort of distilled version. It wasn't quite the IDW version, it wasn't quite the version, but it's like this one that we all kind of understand to be, this sort of universal version. You can usually tell whether Baxter Stockman is white or black. That's usually the
yeah.
or if Shredder's alive, because in the IDW continuity, I don't know if he's currently back or not. I think he might be, but there was a big chunk where he died, and there was a story where he went to hell and stuff. So and we were. James and I were drawing or creating a crossover where Shredder was there, and he still kind of looked like the IDW continuity, but he wasn't dead. And Krang looked different. He didn't look like the Playmates Krang. Do you get what I mean? Because there's an IDW version. So it's just the crossover version. I think that's a good way to describe it.
I like that
because it still doesn't matter. It's still they count, right? They're not like just this. They have no stakes or whatever because they count. They have the same sort of big needs and desires and drama as the other versions. But it has to, because otherwise, if you come into this, and I've noticed this when I was a kid, sometimes they would do a crossover between baBatman and Punisher, but it would be Azrael Batman or something, and you'd be like, what the hell, Batman, and so there's need. I think sometimes comic characters need to change within their own books, but in the form that you want to see them show up, you don't want to see Ben Reilly Spider-Man duking it out with Backlash. There's a deep cut for you. But it was sort of required by the era, and so now I think we're kind of saying it's just going to be it's the version and where it matters and where it counts. You get to put it where you think it matters. As far as continuity. And in my mind, I know where this He-Man lines up with the one in Injustice and the one in Thundercats. I know where he lines up. Okay. But I don't need to tell you that. You can. that's
Yeah, I think when we did Injustice versus Masters of the Universe, you had, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said in the story, ever since we saw those cat people, or we encountered those cat people or something. And I thought that there might have been something in this crossover where they said something that also connected back. This was several months ago. I would have read it, I'm sure, but I can't remember. But I think I remember that. And I know visually I drew a couple of Easter eggs in issue 2 or 3 that when they what's the name of that crazy space station where all the villains go to?
Yeah.
The Blastorama?
Yeah, the Blastorama, which is from... Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of villains that are out of continuity hidden in the background there.
Yeah.
Well, we see... I know I caught Hordak today when I was rereading that issue. He's
did you? There. Okay, well, keep looking around. There's some other...
So, yeah.
He was meeting with all types of villains in there. So.
The thing you're thinking of, Freddie, we ended up deleting it, was when he originally came to Earth in this one, he had been there already because... he had been there to free the planet from Superman.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what it was. Okay. So that got eliminated then?
It was just complicated. It was
okay.
In the end, because I was going to do a whole thing, which I've always liked about He-Man, that his mom is from Earth and that, that astronaut stuff. And I've seen them do, in the DC Universe version, they did a pretty good job with that when they fought the Justice League and stuff, where he goes to Earth and Marlena is an astronaut and stuff. So I kind of wanted to do something with that, but we just didn't have time. And so we're just his mom has told him things about Manhattan.
Okay.
So that was kind of how we ended up doing it. But if there's, 4 issues is so little time.
Tight. It's so tight.
And so there's you got no fat, there's nothing. It's all lean. And so much of what we do with this kind of stuff is Freddie and I'll come up with just a shit ton of ideas, but then we'll just cut. It's just cut.
You have to cut, so much. And actually, we had the real luxury of issue 4 when it comes out this Wednesday it's got 4 extra pages compared to the other issues. So every issue up until now has been 20 pages of sequential storytelling, panel-to-panel work. And when I got the script for issue 4, I was like, everything here needs to be here. All the story beats and everything that Tim wrote. But is there any way I can just get more pages? Because visually, I wanted to be able to expand some of the storytelling for bigger impact. And what that means is fewer panels on a page so that the panels can have more of a breathing room or more of an impact or something. So if I draw the same story, I can do it in 20 pages. It's just going to feel more like a Where's Waldo book. It's just going to be crammed. And there's no room to cut stuff from the story. Everything needed to be there, all the beats and everything. So my first offer was, I even said, I'll just draw the extra 4 pages for free. If there's, if you will just as long as you'll pay Andrew Dalhouse, the colorist, I'll just draw my pages for free. And they were like, well, that's a very generous offer, but we have the room in the budget. We can pay you for the pages. So I did get paid. But so it's 24 pages. And even then, I wish it had been like 36 pages or something. But I also that's me getting greedy, and that's that's my version of fat. If story beats can have its own fat, and visual excess can have too much fat as well. So I felt hopefully like we hit a pretty good balance with what story beats and then the visuals that I was able to do in the 24 pages version.
Yeah, that's the thing that got, and I'm having done this for a long time now. When we had 22 pages of an issue, which was the standard for comics, maybe even 5 years ago, you could definitely do like a double page splash somewhere in a book that beats. But now we cut it down to 20. And you're like, well, that's the thing that got cut. Like, So now we can get, like, I have to fight sometimes to get, and especially when I'm working with Freddie, when I know if I give him a splash or a double page spread, he's going to go nuts. And so I have to, like, I have to give him that. But in 4, we went through one version of this where we were just like, holy shit, is just too much shit going on. I got an email from Freddie once, which was like, I can draw lots of little figures, and I'd like to, but I don't have to do it every single time, okay?
Yeah, I was hoping that didn't come off as too much of a I'm abandoning the visual language of this or whatever. It was just, oh my God, it was just so much. There were times, and this wasn't from Tim trying to punish me for something. It wasn't like we lost a bet and he then had to write every character. It was just when you have a climax of a book, you want it to feel big, you want it to feel impactful. Everybody pretty much needs to be involved. So you can't just say, we're going to focus on one guy while he's doing stuff. You need the team versus you know what I'm saying? Like, you just need everyone.
Work everybody out, like everybody's got to get a moment. You can't.
Yeah.
So we had to make sure that, everybody gets there.
And I'm not sure if I have, maybe other artists feel the same way, and maybe some of them feel like it's unnecessary or something. But I won't say the artist's name, but I remember once when I was going to take over a book, this is over a decade ago, I was going to take over a book. And so I was reading what the previous artist had done. And when I was reading it's like they did so many medium close-ups and full-on close-ups that I started actually feeling slightly dizzy because I didn't know where I was in space. Like, there wasn't enough establishment of the scenario, of the scene or whatever, for me to know who's next to who and that type of thing. And that's very important to me when I'm getting a script from Tim or from anyone, that if like on page 3 of a scene, if a character needs to deliver a line and his line needs to come last, that means likely it would make sense for him to be on the right-hand side of the panel. I have to like figure out almost, and like that's like almost like the climax of the scene or what I need to get to. So I need to kind of extrapolate backwards how I make sure that character starts off someplace in space, but also ends up on the right-hand side in relationship to other characters who have other speaking roles. And maybe other artists that are better at that than me, it's a breeze. But for me, that's where all of the complexity happens, is trying to move the camera around and make characters' movements make sense in the scene or something. And obviously that gets exponentially harder if there's like 10 characters in a scene. And so luckily we had a bigger scene and then a smaller group off to the side, like that we could cut between. I was like, thank you, Tim. So they're not all in the exact same room the whole time,
Yeah. Oh man, that was the lesson learned from Injustice, Masters Universe, because we had, you have to you want all the characters to get an emotional moment, but they can't all do it if they're all in a scene and there's 12 of them. It's like you have to split them off. It's a lot of technical stuff, which I think is, kind of surprising sometimes with this stuff, because you think you're going to run completely on like emotion and enthusiasm, but a lot of times you're running on like, this is technical. It has to have, I have to have these. It's got to feel right. It's got to be 4 pages for this property, 4 pages for this one. Like I can't, it's way more technical than you might think.
Yeah, and you don't want to unbalance the crossovers.
Yeah, you have to give characters that can't be a Turtles facing. They can't win on all the Turtle side. It can't be all of the master. It's like it's weird and kind of fun, but it is also like something I didn't know before I started doing this. And there's a reason that people come to people like James or Freddie or I now, because we've done this a bunch of times and we know the math. Like after I've done these, now I get approached to do crossovers because I know how to do it. Like I know.
Yeah. You know how to give everybody, all these characters, their time to shine. And I mean, especially in these big, in franchises like these, you've got so many like fan favorite characters that people want to see do something, and in both Turtles and Masters of the Universe. And so I think you guys do it. You do it pretty well. You do it better than I could. That's for sure. So of the stuff. And obviously, this is, what you guys can speak to. Of the stuff that you had to kind of trim and cut, was there any specific thing for either of you that you really wanted to have in this crossover that just had to be dropped?
There's a lot of stuff, but the two that come to mind is that we established in issue 1 that for sure Mikey's hair is a wig. Like we just see him in the panel, he smacks it on his bald head. And then if we had like another issue or two, I had begged Tim to make a scene where in battle, Mikey's wig flies off or he gets knocked off his head, and then they have to escape. And he's like, no, and reaching for the wig. But
does Indiana Jones reach for the hat?
Yeah, for the hat, but he doesn't get it. And he's so bummed out. And even though you could just make a new wig or whatever, like a scene where it would be like the end of the second act where everyone's bummed out, and he's bummed mainly about the loss of his wig, and that Orko would give him magical hair with like you'd actually see. I wanted to do like a close up of his scalp and hair actually erupting from the scalp, and he has like this lush, beautiful hair, and it's his hair now. It's not a wig even, it's his hair. So we didn't have space for that. Then the other.
Panels. And we're like, nope, we're gonna have 4 panels for that.
No, I wanted it to be like a 3-page sequence, like a splash page of his hair. It's full and beautiful, He's brushing it, he can't brush a wig as easily. So, then the other, do you want to alternate? Do you have one right up in your brain?
What's yours? Give me some more.
Okay, well, the other one is that if you look at Ninjor's foot, it's webbed like a chicken foot kind of, but it sure looks an awful lot like the Foot Clan symbol. So, and it's a red, I'm talking about, there's the Foot Clan symbol that looks like an actual foot, but I'm talking about the IDW continuity that's more like Shredder's helmet. I think that's actually supposed to be what it's kind of implying. So if we had a different, more page count or just whatever, I don't know. If we'd had a different continuity, or my suggestion was, since when Skeletor in the mini comics kind of like enslaves Ninjor, it's not real specific on where he came from. It's like I just picture that Ninjor is in his home world or something, training, and then Skeletor just kind of reached through reality and snatched him out. Even if it's just like an actual magical beam that yanked him out or something. So if we had the space, or if everyone had agreed, because I don't know if anyone if IDW would have been okay with this, that Ninjor would have been one of the founders of the foot, or he would have been the one who instituted that symbol for the foot, and it's literally his foot. It felt so perfect to me. I was so excited about it, but we just didn't really have the space anyway. Then if we'd had the space, I don't know if Nickelodeon or whoever, Viacom, would have been fine with Ninjor, who's not their property being so instrumentally connected to the foundation of the continuity of something. So those are the two things that pop out to me immediately, though. I'm sure Tim has probably 24 that, it's just many things that we probably wanted to do. But
yeah, I mean, I would love to have set up, and we just didn't have room for it, but because it's like this universal canon or whatever, that Ninja had worked for Skeletor before, but that he was kind of abused like all the other henchmen were. Right. And so I wanted to play it like he, that you saw more. I want to have like more of the backstory between Skeletor and Ninja, but it was way less emotionally important than the backstory between, Shredder and Ninja, right? That he was a student of that, like that was more important, even though I kind of felt like, we needed to see why Ninja felt like he had to train, that he was, kind of manipulated, used by Skeletor, and he didn't like it. And then he was like, I'm going to be better than all these guys. That really bothered me, but I just didn't have the background for it. And, him mixing Skeletor and Ninja was way less interesting than mixing Shredder and Ninja. So like, even though I think we needed that space, we just didn't have it, which sucks. I would also have loved to use, and we set it up a little bit, Roboto and Metalhead, like becoming Metalboto. Like, we see in the background, but we just didn't have room for it. Plus, it's the same story, which is basically that they both built robots. Like, it's cool. It's a great toy. I would have loved to have used it, but it didn't have any like emotional things, so it really needed to be done. And then I would have loved to have used the Hordak. Because he's not part of like the later sort of storyline that involves the Snake Man, really, the Reptile Wars. So he would have fit in here, but no way did we have room for him at all. There was no place to put him. And that kind of bummed me out. I would have loved to also have done something with like Merman and like all the characters that kind of got passed by, Leatherhead. Like I would have loved to have used them more, but we just didn't have room for him, And that again, that's a 6-issue story, or that's a
10-issue, 12 issues. Yeah, if we had more space, we could have really. I think that valuable space of having Ninja with Shredder, if we'd had just a lot of page count earlier in the series to really pay it off, because it's not something you want to just introduce at the beginning of one issue, then pay it off at the end of an issue. You want to have the readers almost forget about it, or it become foundational. And it seems like it's meant for something else, and then it becomes much more important later. There was another one. I mean, I'm hoping one day we can do a sequel to this or something. Who knows? But so hopefully this isn't a spoiler for that. But I think it's. I mean, Triceratons. It would make sense for them to come back into the story. But I wanted more Triceratons. I love drawing the Triceratons.
Yeah.
And I remember, Tim, you at one point when we were just kicking out ideas and stuff at the very beginning, you had said something about you would love to see an aerial bombardment of Triceraton ships in orbit over Eternia. And that's such a cool, powerful visual, and how they would handle that. That's just great, and in the future we could still do that. That's not too much, that's like a cool scene. It doesn't spoil any plot stuff. So anyway, I mean, because we talked, if we went back and reread through emails and stuff, we'd probably have other stuff, but these are just kind of off the top of our heads. So.
We wanted to use Laker too, which is the Slash Faker figure, which is such a cool toy. But again,
fantastic toy.
No, like as far as the story, there's no way to stick him in there. We show him, I think, twice in the background, but like
of issue 1.
Yeah, but he doesn't fit into what we were doing. And I wish I could have done more with April. That honestly kind of bummed me out. We got to use her.
No, dude, you did great with her in the final issue. I mean, maybe if you wanted room earlier on, but you paid her off big time.
A little earlier. I mean, again, we know the deal with April. She's a reporter. She goes trying to find we got stuff in there, and I don't think anything is lost there. But I would have loved to have done more there. I kind of traded the relationship the Turtles have with April for the relationship the Turtles have with Splinter, which I get. Again, more emotional. I will always cheat on the one that's gives us more feeling. That's the but those are the things that I would have loved to have played with a little more. I would have loved to have a Tila April scene. We didn't get that, so we did what we could. We did get I won't spoil 4, but yeah, it's just there's just things that I wish we got that we didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying about April, but I think you did an awesome job with her in issue 4. I think that was that really pays off kind of like the essence of what a reporter does, assuming that they're, uncovering bad stuff. I mean, she has like a real heroic moment.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when reading it, I was like, that's really clever, the way that because the design of her character as a toy, almost like when I first saw her because I drew her in the mini comics and stuff, and she's essentially just there with cool powers, and I'm talking about in the mini comics, and there's not a whole bunch of explanation as to exactly what she's doing, or why it connects or whatever. But without spoiling it or whatever, I think Tim did a great job with it, like the double page spread specifically. So,
well, as a reader, I really enjoyed that.
Oh, so have you got an early copy of it?
Yeah, I got an early copy of it, so I got to read issue 4.
Okay, all right. So you know what I'm talking about then. So
yes.
Okay, cool.
I like it. It's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up kind of the emotional aspects of the storytelling, because I think that's one thing about both of these franchises that I like that you kind of focus on, and it's reason they're close to my heart, because it's kind of baked into the essence of what these two brands represent. He-Man, obviously, we all know the moral lessons that were at the end of the episodes in the 80s. With the Turtles, it always has such a good emphasis on the importance of family and brotherhood and coming together for each other and being there for each other. I think specifically of the first live action movie, of that fireside scene of Splinter talking to his sons, and just how emotionally effective it was when I watched it as a kid, and even now as a father myself, how emotionally touching that is. And so in this series, that kind of the emotional themes that I took out of it is you have these characters who are bigger than life. You've got He-Man, who's the most powerful man in the universe. You've got the Ninja Turtles who do what they do, but they're kids, and they have this responsibility kind of thrust upon them.
Yeah, and He-Man too. Kid too. Exactly.
So, yeah, I guess that's just kind of my question. How, was that always kind of the intention for you guys to showcase that aspect, kind of that more vulnerable state of these powerful characters?
Yeah, I mean, we set it up in issue 1. When it's like the first or second page when Donnie and Mikey, they're reporting back to Splinter and April what's going on, and they're like, and it's clear that Splinter is worried about them because they have all this responsibility put on their shoulders, and they're just kids, and so then, well, I mean, not to spoil anything, but that is the theme, I think, for us, is that they're teenagers. I think when you put two things together, you try to find the things that connect them. And obviously Batman Ninja Turtles, the thing that connects them is ninja stuff and crazy villains, right? That's the thing. And when you put, Master Universe and Thundercats, it's like princes, right? They're both like royalty and all this sort of stuff. And then when you put also crazy villains, and then when you put He-Man Turtles thing together, it's like they're teenagers with an outsized amount of power and responsibility, and they just want to be at their core kids, right? Like that's kind of the get on there. And like for me, as you get older, you start out relating to, Prince Adam and Ninja Turtles, and then when you get older, you relate to Splinter and Man at Arms, right? That's the right, which is why you're called Dad at Arms, and right, that's
it. It's later in my notes. I bring that up exactly, that those are the two characters that I relate to the most in this, is Splinter and Man at Arms, and it's because of that. They're fathers.
Dads, and we're older, but I think the key on these is you find those things and you try to make sure that you get those key moments, and that's why Man at Arms has some of the bigger moments in here, because he's that for He-Man, right? Like for sure, he's that mentor figure. He's wise. He's different than Splinter, but he's those things for him. And other characters can represent smaller things. And they don't have to necessarily have a big moment, but Casey Jones is the impulse sort of aspect of a teenager, like He-Man, Turtles. So it's like I have to have him in there for sure, but he doesn't have to have a big role. Like he has to. So it's like figuring out those, emotional importances, I think, is the key.
Yeah. The very first. So Tim is an excellent writer, and anything he wants to write is going to be, it's going to be powerful. Okay. But when at the very beginning of the project, because he was just being generous and was just like, okay, what are some things that you would like to draw or would like to see? Is like he's basically opening himself up for me to just throw a bunch of stuff that a bunch of it won't stick, but there might be some things that kind of congeal or connect to other ideas that he has, or maybe they kind of mix together and create a third unique thing that neither of us really suggested, but kind of mutated out of it. And this was just an idea that I felt from an emotional point that ended up not really working. I mean, Splinter is definitely an emotional core or whatever, but what I thought was, one of my first suggestions was, if the Turtles saw that Splinter was aging in a way where he's, ultra, he has great technique and all this stuff, but he's just mortal. Eventually he's going to break down and stuff. But that there was a place on Eternia that if Splinter lived there, he would literally not age. And that what they would either give up of either separating themselves from Splinter. So none of this would work as far as continuity. You don't want Splinter at the end of the crossover to be stuck on Eternia, all right? Because he needs to be back in New York and stuff. But what I was trying to suggest was an emotional conundrum where, do the Turtles abandon Manhattan because they want to be with Splinter, who can live forever in this place where he's always healthy? Or will they, all of them stay in New York because they have responsibilities there and just acknowledge that Splinter has a finite amount of time on Earth? And that's, it's like seeing a loved one pass away and knowing that there was a possibility that if things had worked out differently, you could have prolonged their life. I don't know, whatever. And none of that worked out, but that was, to me, would have been a really interesting emotional note to explore potentially. What was that, Tim?
We did sort of, because then we got that design for King Grayskull, or Splinter Grayskull, which the toy, is this Splinter as King Grayskull with the sword and everything. And again, we weren't going to have time for really that, but I did want to make sure the idea that you had that which you mentioned, which was Splinter would have a connection to the power of Grayskull, and we see that right away, right? He's able to sort of discern things about the sword because he's very in tune. And then we kind of get to it at the end, but not as much as if we'd had more room, most certainly. But yeah.
And for clarity, what you did with Splinter is wonderful. And actually, my favorite panel of the whole crossover is in issue 4. And spoiler alert, the good guys win. Okay, I'm sure we all knew that. But specifically, there's I think on page 21 or something, there's the first panel where basically Splinter is now reunited with the Turtles, and he gives them all a group hug, like they're just in this group hug. And that's actually my favorite panel of the ones that I drew for the whole crossover, not just issue 4, but all of them. So all of the complex other things that I drew, hopefully people will enjoy, and I enjoyed drawing it and stuff. But that's the one that I feel emotionally resonates with me the most, because he, in my opinion, actually looks really proud and happy to see his sons. I feel like there's actual emotion in the panel, which makes me feel good. So I think what you did is great. It's like that's just a different version of the same sort of emotional beat we could have hit.
Yeah. I will say, as a reader who has followed both of you for years now, I'm not embarrassed to say, Tim, you have made me, weep reading multiple times, especially with these He-Man stories. One of them is in this issue 4 of Turtles of Grayskull, the previous, the Masters of the Multiverse story you did, just the character work between He-Man and Teela, and just having that moment of, the mobile game version of He-Man finally being able to tell Teela, not his Teela, but a different Teela, how he felt, and just everything he tried to do that ultimately didn't come to fruition, because of circumstance. But that's why I keep coming back to your writing, and because it touches me emotionally, and I get to have that catharsis, and it's great. And then Freddie, for you, like I've said, you are probably one of my favorite Motu artists at the time and at the moment. And
Thanks, man.
just in this issue specifically, there's a scene, and I don't want to get spoilers. I'm going to bring it up because it's touching, and just I feel it as a father just wanting to protect my own sons from what the world has to offer and what the world can do and the mistakes they can make and things like that. And I think
there's an infinite number of ways it can go wrong.
Exactly.
And like, how do you try to keep them on the rails but make them be able to be self-deterministic about their own destiny and stuff?
Yes.
I don't have kids, but that's my fear. That's one of my fears and why I don't have kids is because of that.
Sometimes you have to reconcile the fact that these children have agency and they're going to be able to use that agency for themselves as they should. That's part of being a person in the world. But just how as parents to prepare them for that. And I think these stories really help me reconcile a lot of real world concerns that I have for my own children. So to the both of you, seeing Splinter hug his sons and being proud of his sons, thank you for seeing, Man-at-Arms, how he teaches Prince Adam and leads Prince Adam to be a better man and use his power wisely. I appreciate it so much. So that's my spoilers.
The only of the Turtles of Grayskull figures I have hanging in my office is the Man-at-Arms one. Now, I love the design, but as I got older, then you're like, oh, this is a Man-at-Arms story. This is Splinter's story. That's what, as you get older, that's the key kind of to some degree is that those characters, when you were a kid, be like, oh, that guy's lame,
Yeah, I never felt like Man-at-Arms was lame, and I never thought Splinter was lame. But since I've become elderly, I've connected more and more with them and realized that because I was raised without a father, the idea of having a character, specifically like Splinter, is the one that I'm thinking of. Or Superman as well would be a pretty awesome father to have around or something. But the idea of having somebody who is always making time for you and they're infinitely capable and super wise and all this stuff, who would have the patience to teach you lessons or try to point out everybody fails, but it's how you move on and try to improve upon that and remembering, that the failure isn't the end. It's how you cope with it is the bigger lesson. Nobody is flawless every time. And actually, even just in my personal life, if I encounter somebody who's made mistakes and they show a bigger lesson that they've learned from that, that's much more of that person is usually more significant in my life because I can see that they learned something as opposed to they've never taken a risk. And if they ever do fail, their life's just going to fall apart because they just don't know how to cope with failure. Sure. It's better that they failed and learned from it.
Yeah, and that's one thing this is a little side thing too, but the Man-at-Arms thing for me, as a kid, I did like him, but I didn't sort of recognize it as much as I do now. He's a veteran, right? He's been through horrible things, and he's different. He sees the world different than Adam, who has never, who had never been through a war and who had never seen these horrible things, or Tila or anybody else. And my grandfather, when I was a kid, was a World War II vet, so that sort of. And he would only occasionally tell you anything about it, but when he did, it would be like, oh shit, Grandpa's breaking out a World War II story. This is serious. He would very rarely do it. And I kind of feel like that's how I treat Man-at-Arms too, because he's always here's a lesson in the worst things about humanity, or here's a lesson. He doesn't do it unless it's he needs to,
Yeah.
And when he talks, you should probably listen.
Yeah. Because my grandpa was like that too. He's mostly he would crack jokes, and then every once in a while it'd be like, boom, he dropped some shit on you, and you just limp home because you're like, oh my God,
Yeah. So, well, I don't know if I have many more questions for you guys. One fun question, and then one. So I'll ask the fun question first. When doing these crossovers and working in this space, what is kind of the ultimate crossover for either of you that you would like to see happen?
If I could just...
right now for me, I'm looking at my shelf, and I have some vintage Skeleton Warriors toys there, and I just keep thinking how cool it would be to see them cross over with E-Man. But
I think if I could just name, something like, do you guys remember Pirates of Darkwater, that cartoon?
Yeah,
that was an amazing cartoon, and I felt like it. I don't know why it didn't catch on. Maybe I know that they changed the time slot a lot because as a kid I was confused, what was wrong with it, or maybe it had production schedule problems or something. But I would love that to cross over with Thundar the Barbarian, He-Man, and like, you know, something like, I don't know. And then so those are a little less heard of, and then He-Man would be probably the main character, and or with Lion-O from Thundercats. That would be a really great crossover, I think, because they all have cool sword stuff, and they all have some technology and fantasy elements and all that stuff. But I don't know. I'm down for any types of crossovers, really.
Love it. Man,
I'm writing Godzilla right now, and now I want to do Master Universe versus Godzilla.
That would be cool. That would be so cool.
Kaiju on a turn, and now they're like, oh shit! Like there's a lot where, you know, there's magic, and you can have those, but then you have like Godzilla stomping on like Bashosaurus and like Spidor.
Get Tyrannosaurus in there. And that would be crazy.
And Godzilla at the end. I don't know. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff you could do with that one.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So there's my pitch for that Dark Horse Naughty Dog.
I love it. And for my final question, you know, kind of, you know, we kind of alluded to it a little bit. I think you guys already kind of answered it, but it's kind of left open for maybe more stories to tell. And obviously the toy line has more designs in it with the Reptile Wars toys, where it brings in the Snake Men and stuff. But what, if you guys can say, you know, what's next for you guys, for your projects?
We smile at each other.
We're working on something together. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to still be working with Tim, and we're working in a similar vein. And we're getting to draw, or I'm getting to draw cool muscular characters doing cool stuff. But we've actually signed contracts and stuff that say that we can't talk about it yet. But I'm very excited to be working. We've already done an issue, and now we're on issue 2. So
I've written all 4. So we are.
Oh, you have?
I've written
all. You're way ahead. I was really delayed on issue 4 of Turtles of Grayskull. So I guess during that time you hit all your deadlines, and I'm lagging us behind. So
yeah. It's going to be a good one. You're going to be thrilled because I think Freddie, this might be one of our best things together so far. I think that first issue is
awesome.
Pretty rocking.
Awesome. Cool. I'm going to have the rust for issue 2 probably tomorrow or the next day, something like that.
Okay. And this is the first time I figured out how to give Freddie room. I backed off a little bit on my bullshit, and now there's.
I don't think any of it was BS, by the way, in issue 4. It was me in a really, like, I have not slept in a while, and I'm so tired right now. Please, mercy.
Yeah.
I'm saying uncle, you know.
Well, yes. I knew I had nearly murdered you, so I tried.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks to the both of you for spending time with me today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Talk in the future about whatever's coming next.
Yeah, I'd like that.
So, all right. Where can people find you online and stuff if they want to follow you guys?
My website is freddieart.com, and I'm Freddie Art on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm Freddie Williams on Facebook. I think those are the main places that I'm on.
I'm Hacking Tim Seeley on Blue Sky and Tim Seeley on Instagram.
Awesome. Cool. And again, this issue 4 of Turtles of Grayskull, which is the final issue for this series, comes out this week, April 23rd, which is a Wednesday. So go get it. And until next time, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.